Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing story coming to us from the US. We have Mina the Andromedan on board today. Mina is a 12D Andromedan slash Archangel slash Lyran Hybrid who sits on the Andromedan Council and who was sent to Earth to help humanity realize its potential and choose higher timelines. She is of the Emerald Order of the Central Race. She is a channeler of messages and light language. She offers readings and classes in which she uses her psionic abilities, messages from source/guides, record of all records, remote viewing, and timeline shifting through the quantum field to access what she needs to know in order to help those who are sent to her via source to help facilitate a higher ascension trajectory. So, Mina, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Um, I'd love to get into your story, at least in the early years. Could you talk about your childhood before we get into the good stuff, and just talk about where you grew up and the environment that you grew up in?
I have my earliest memories are in utero. I have a very strange gift in which I don't forget things. So everything I never passed through the veil of forgetting when I crossed over. So I carried all my memories with me from previous incarnations or parallel lives. So I remember choosing to come. I remember looking at a menu, so to speak, and choosing a lot of the events that happened to me. And I remember coming through utero, and I remember being born, and it was awful. And I remember being, a very, very small baby and growing through certain things. And I can even tell my mom stories, and she's like, "How in the world could you know that? You were like 9 months old." I described her house that we had when I was 9 months old. So I was a very precocious, very advanced for my age. I used to tell her, like, "You're not my mom. I'm an alien." And as a child. And I was speaking complete sentences at like 11 months old. So I was very, very advanced for my age. So I would always get into trouble because I would do things that were more advanced than I should have been doing. So I would climb on top of the roof at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd get out, climb a chair, unlock the door, come up, climb the house, and I would bring my toys up there and I would sit and commune with the stars and have like a little tea party underneath the stars. And she would ask me, what I was doing, and she said I used to speak like babble a language that she didn't understand. So earliest forms of light language, and she said, like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Talking to my people." Like I would look at her like she was stupid or something. So she used to say, she's like, "I always felt like you were always looking down at me, like, don't you know this?" But she said I was just very precocious, and I would always ask questions that were beyond my years, and just very strange. She said I was like 3. I climbed out, went outside, directed traffic at like 3, and she was for a nervous wreck trying to figure out where I was, and I'm in the middle of the street trying to direct traffic. So that was the early years. So that was all before the age of 3. And then after that, when I was in kindergarten, was the very first time I was taken by the government. And so I was taken for 4 months without my mom knowing. We lived in Tucumcari, New Mexico. New Mexico, should have known. My mom is ex-military. She worked for the Pentagon. So that's important to notate. She was a linguist, and she can understand languages she doesn't speak. So that gift was transferred to me. My mother is also a starseed, which she awoke in much later. But anyways, they did take me for 4 months. And how it worked is Tucumcari is like a very small town. You blink and you miss the town. And I would get on the bus. My mom would already be at work. She would go to work really early. And so I would get on the bus by myself. And the bus would pick me up at 5:30 in the morning, which is a little bizarre if you think about it, if you think about it logically. But to me, I didn't know any better. So I'd get on the bus, and it would take an hour and a half to get to school. And my mom didn't know this. I realized later she didn't know this. But I would only be on the bus with like 3 other kids. So it was a very small amount of kids. And I would fall asleep. And then we'd wake up, and we'd be at this nondescript building. It was like 1 story tall, and it was like the cement, like the old government buildings it kind of looked like. And there was like a guard shack and a gate, like an old gate. And the guard would be wearing this, like what I later realized was Marine uniform, the Marines from the military. And it would be like beige slacks with like blue striped kind of sachet across, and then this like white like helmet type thing. And they would let us in, and then we would get in, get off the bus. And as soon as I crossed the threshold of the doorway, my memory snapped. Like I have nothing. It's like a blank slate. I can't. It's like a big hole. And I would wake up on the bus going home. So that was all day long at school, like not at school, but thinking, my school time, the whole block of time that I would just have no memory of. And I would get home, and this went on for some time. And then finally, I found out the school had been trying to call my mom, but the calls would get rerouted and they would go to somewhere else. And then finally, I guess one of the teachers or the administrative person came to my house, and they caught my mom, because every time they would come, she wouldn't be home. She'd be working. So they finally caught her one day and told her what was happening, that I had never been to school and all of these things. And my mom fled with us. And so this went on for 4 months like this. And she fled. We moved immediately and left the whole state. So went to Galveston, Texas. So that was just, that whole kindergarten thing. So that was pretty intense, I think. And I learned, I moved around a lot because my mom was in the military, and then she got out of the military. We still moved quite a bit. And I ended up going back to New Mexico for 5th and 6th grade and stayed all the way to 8th grade. And through that time, there was some other weird events that happened. For example, I would always get strep throat. It was very bizarre. Like, even if there was no kids that would be sick, if somebody was like a mile down the road and had it, I would suddenly get it. It was really bizarre. And then my mom got this note on the door, and it was like from the University of New Mexico Hospital. And it was like, is your child getting strep throat a lot? Well, if you take it and participate in this research study, we will pay you money. And my mom was like, she's a single mom. So she was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And she takes me to the University of New Mexico Hospital. And they say the program, they're going to inject me with this like kind of this vaccine to trial and error, so I don't get sick anymore. And they would take me back and they would inject me with these things. And after that trial, or after that period of time, I never got sick again. I never got strep throat. I never got the flu. I never got sick at all anymore. But interestingly enough, I did get COVID twice. But anyways, besides that, I never got sick. So that was really interesting and very strange that I would always get strep throat, and then suddenly this magical flyer appeared on my mom's door. So that was one strange thing. Then I found out later on, when I was like 18, 19, I was applying for different positions, and I was also going to university. I found out, or I was told, that I had an FBI number. And an FBI number, I didn't even know what that was. I tried to ask the person because I was applying for this position. She goes, I can't tell you what it is, but you can Google it. So I Googled it, and it said an FBI number is given to a person who is either a terrorist or a person of interest. So I realized that, and she said, what was interesting is she says, you've had it since before you were 18. So that means that the government has been tracking me since before I was an adult. So I knew that there was something to the fact that I had been taken as a child. So that's basically my childhood in a nutshell. I skipped grades. I was in Mensa. I mean, I was pretty advanced for my age, but I mean, I feel like that's kind of just par for the course of how my childhood was. So,
Do you know why? At least how you blacked out? Did they gas you? Did you black out in the actual bus, or what happened?
no, it was as soon as I walked through the door. I remember seeing the shape of the door. I remember the hallway, and I was like, the most recent time I had the most memory, I guess. So I was walking, there was 3 kids in front of me, and there was one behind me. And I walked in, and then I looked at the doorway because it's so much bigger, and it was like those like awful linoleum floors, and like the military style. I don't know if you've ever been in military barracks or anything. It was like this awful flooring, and there was like nondescript walls, and there was like a lady with a clipboard. And as soon as I walk in, then that's it. I don't know. So what I think happened is whenever they got us to the room, they did something to us there and just erased it up to the door or something, like erased a certain block of time. So I do know I've heard of some of the things that like the men in black use. And I will say I was visited one other time, and this one I really do think it was the men in black, but this was also, I was 19. And at the time, I had been experimenting with some things. And so they just happened to knock on my door during that time. And so I look out the peephole, and there's these two guys in black suits with black shades having black briefcases. And I was just like, what is this? Like, so I opened the door, and I suddenly, like, I should have just been maybe a little, like, we'll just say a little high. But instead, I was suddenly off kilter. I lost my balance, and I felt like I was being controlled. Like, I felt like I had to answer. They were like asking me questions, drilling me with questions. Where is this? Where did you go this time? Da, 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 and I felt like I had to answer. It was really bizarre. And they said, you need to leave town. You need to get out of here. You need to stop dealing with these people, blah, blah, blah. And then they left. And all I remember was like, I got to go. I called my mom, like, I need to get out of here. So, I mean, that was like pretty intense. So that I'm pretty sure was actually the men in black. But again, if they've already been tracking me, then, I mean, it makes sense that for them to show up and just suddenly be on my doorstep and know things. They knew like so many things. So that was pretty intimidating.
Did you ever get regressed, at least to try to find out what type of activities happened over there?
Yeah, it's on the checklist. I have a QHHT session scheduled, so I'm gonna dive deep into that because I really want to know. I was told by my higher self, because I did ask, I do have this really, really deep connection with my higher self, and basically what she said is that they were testing psychic abilities. So they were testing psychic abilities, they were testing my telepathy, but because I've had some NDEs and also some actual like death, like I died. Essentially, during those times, I had gotten fractals in my soul, and I'll explain what fractals are here in a minute. But every time I died, I would get another fractal. But the very first time I died was after they took me. So I didn't have that integration. So my gifts were strong, but they weren't as strong as they could have been. So she said basically they didn't glean as much information as they had hoped they would glean. So yeah, so I don't know if my mom was a part of some program she just didn't know, because when you're in the military, you're property of the government. And I've heard that, they do experiment, and I was told, my mom is a starseed as well, and she is very gifted. She does have psychic abilities. So, I mean, it's not a far leap to think that they were also using her, tracking her in some way. I mean, she was pregnant with me in the military. I mean, there's no telling, single parent, who knows? So.
So what happened after that? So they stopped coming after you?
Well, I ended up going to school, and I had changed my majors a couple times. I have several degrees, and I really like learning, and humans fascinate me. So I got a pre-med, and I was marine biology major, and then I got a biology, and then I got political science, and then East Asian studies, all these different degrees. And so I feel like I was being led. So I'm going to explain how. So I started out with marine biology, and then all of a sudden there was a hurricane and everything closed my school. And it was actually Hurricane Katrina, and it closed that whole area. So school was just like canceled indefinitely until they could rebuild that area. So I had to switch schools. And because that is a marine biology school and there isn't any others that were any locally, I had to transfer and change my major. So I switched to biology, and I did pre-med. And then so I did that, and then I got close to time for clinicals and stuff, and I was like, no, you know what? I can't deal with working with children and old people. Like, I can't stand to see them die. Like, I'll just cry all the time or something. So I switched to political science, and then suddenly I got an offer from the University of New Mexico for their national security studies program, to work, with the governmental acronyms, we'll say. And so I went to the University of New Mexico and I got like a lot of scholarships and things. And my instructors were CIA, NSA, DIA, NATO. So, and I got put in this program. I got to work with diplomats and all kinds of things and military scientists. In fact, one of my instructors was a biological nuclear warhead scientist at Los Alamos and Sandia Labs. So I had many of those as my instructors. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. And so I got 2 degrees from that university, and I was a shoo-in. I was automatic, like accepting for different acronyms. And it was very interesting. I still kept all the letters and stuff, accepting. And then actually that's how I found out that I had the FBI number. That they told me that. So
Fascinating. How did the government know about you? Is it really just because of your mom and her affiliation with the military, or how did they? Because they might have. There's probably a protocol of what type of children they go after. So, did you figure out
yeah.
why?
Well, I did do some research on the CREST files, the declassified CIA files, and I did find that there was a partnership between China and the United States about children that were born in the 80s to 90s that had supernatural gifts or psychic abilities, and they wanted to test them. And so they had an exchange program where they would research the students. They'd get the intel or research from the Chinese student, and then the United States would partnership with these students. But they didn't really say where they got the students. Like, they didn't say where they got the children. So I think that I might have been part of that program when I was in kindergarten. And so that they had been tracking me because of that, watching to see if I progressed, developed more gifts. I mean, the fact, obviously, that I was highly intelligent. And I mean, I don't know what I said to them when I was there. I could have told them I was an alien. I don't know. I was a kindergartner, and I was still very much close to the veil, so to speak. Like, I was only, at that age, 5 years old, where I was very close to the veil. So I would have still had strong memories, and I didn't have a fear of saying like what I was. You know what I mean? That hadn't been instilled in me, because I could talk about like that to my family. So I didn't have this fear. So I wonder if I had said something. So they're probably like, we need to keep our eye on her. Like, so, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, I think also too, because my mom's in the military, and I also have a lot of my family members in the military, and I do have a cousin who's in the CIA. So I think there's just a lot of connections that they're just like, yeah, we need to watch her.
Do you know why that you got step throat? Was it? Did you contract? Did you get something over there and you brought it home?
I mean, I don't know. It's just a strange thing. I mean, Streptococcus B was the strain, and just what I've learned in the medical industry and my medical training is that it's something that's normally contracted by. It is contagion. It's a contagion. So. You would contract it through some either mucus or somebody sneezing on you, coughing on you. But the fact that I got it so much in such a short frame of time tells me it feels almost intentional. Like they needed to get me in that program so that they could do whatever they needed to do to me. Because what's strange about the injecting is like they wouldn't let my mom go back. So my mom didn't go back whenever they injected me, which I always thought, like now as an adult looking back on that memory, I'm like, that was bizarre. Like usually they let the parents go with the child. I mean, I was like 10 years old. So I feel like that's a little bizarre. So I mean, I don't know what they would have injected me, but it is telling that I never got sick again. So I don't know. I mean, I hear some of the super soldier stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say. It really is. And I have had some genetic testing. I've actually did test my genes, and I went to a starseed doctor. She's somebody I trust to actually test my genetics outside of the pharmaceutical and the insurance industry, and because I wanted some real results. And I have some weird genetic anomalies, which I've always had, and my mom also has them. I have a recessive genes. It's called a Siberian gene. So essentially what that means is I can, way back in ancient days, the people that I come from lived in the Beringian Strait in between Siberia and Alaska. So I have a rare gene that I can survive in sub-zero temperatures. That's one thing. And I also have a rare, I'm immune to vaccines. So that's a really bizarre one. So, and my mom as well. So no matter how many times we get the mumps or measles vaccine or any other vaccine, it will not take. It's like we never got it. But we also don't get the disease either.
Wow.
So that's why I say I'm hybrid. I am hybrid genetic. So I do know that.
Are you aware if you had any like markings when you got returned from
Mm.
the abductions?
I don't think so. I didn't. The only one that I had, but I think everybody gets this one. What is it? Where you get the tetanus? Is that the one where you get the little bump? But I mean, other than that, no. Um, I didn't have like any surgery. I didn't have any like anything other than knowing that they injected me those few times. But I didn't have any scarring or anything like that. So hopefully they didn't inject anything like crazy, or I know they didn't do any surgery, but
So during the early years, you did get any like ET-ish type of events happening?
yes. Well, but I feel like for those, so those were not like uncommon occurrences. So I guess that I always gloss over that because for me that isn't an uncommon thing. So it's like, oh yeah, it's like asking, oh, did you have coffee on this day? Yeah. you know. But essentially, whenever I would go up on the roof, when I would be talking to the stars, that's what I was doing. She said I'd be talking to people all the time. I would talk to Michael, the Archangel, all the time as a kid. They were always with me. It wasn't like it would be weird if they weren't with me. So as far as like extraterrestrials in the typical sense of the word, in the early years, the memories and things I talked about, like I always talk to the angels because the how it worked with the way that I incorporated those lives is it happened in a kind of linear fashion. So what I mean by that is the archangel, the mermaid, and the cetacean being were the first memories I always talked about as a kid. I remember these lives. Those are the lives I remember. So those were closest to, I guess, my memory, and those were the ones I was integrating at that time. Then when I became a teenager, I started incorporating the Lyran, and so I had memories of those, and cats were with me my entire life. And then after the Lyran, I started having what I realized later was the Speakin, which is a interdimensional being, and as well as the Procyon being, which is an actual physical being, but they come from the Procyon region. You might know them. They're kind of similar to ET. But anyways, they're highly psychic, and they have a lot of different abilities. But that was that time frame. The very last lives that I incorporated was the Andromedans. And that was the furthest from my memory if you're thinking linear, because that was my origin. So that's kind of how it worked. So most of the more like galactic experiences happened later.
Okay. How much of the your past lives, at least the memories, do you remember?
A lot. I don't remember every memory from every life, but I remember most memories from every life.
Could you get into one of them and try to explain to everybody what happened to you?
Yeah. So, for example, the earliest memory I have is the creation of this universe. So I actually remember the creation. My mom also has this memory. We both come from the central race. What that means is the archangels and the archaea. You can actually, I think there is like a book that's called the Urantia Papers. I've never read it, but my clients always tell me that it is similar to the information I share. But essentially, it talks about the 7 layers of heaven, of Havana and Oventun, and basically outside of this universe. This is only one universe of very many, and it's there's something called the Omniverse, and this is a collection of the universes that the archangels or the central race created. And every universe has a primordial or has a prime creator source, and then there is a primordial mother source that is over. So remember, it's always the microcosm within the macrocosm, right? We are always expanding outwards. So essentially, there's multiple collection of universes, and the archangels are in charge of creation of the universes. And this universe is actually Lord Michael, Archangel Michael's universe, which is why so many people are connected to him in this existence. And it is more of a a patriarchal universe, duality, polarity, that kind of thing. And this is the only universe that has time, and this is the last universe to ascend. And that's why there are so many different species during this time, because it's kind of all boots on the ground. So that my first memory is of the creation of this universe, and I remember many other universes too. So it was definitely an interesting experience to have as a child. That I'm like, oh, this is not the first universe. Having this conversation with my mom, where she's talking to a 3-year-old. So Yeah.
How about
And
the
then
yeah, the one with the mermaids? That's
yeah, I that was a very difficult one for me as a child to have because I remember being tortured for information and killed. And so I remember up until my death, and I remember like there was these like underwater kind of like, I guess the closest like human word I can say is like a submarine. It's similar. It's very advanced technology, and it was like this ancient kind of black like graphene material, graphite material, and essentially I would have, as I was a spy, and I had to go in and try and get intel on this. And the mermaids are very much a warrior race, and so when the Draconians invaded, they gave the ultimatum like submit or die, and we were like, we'll fight you to the death, and that's almost what we did. And so I remember like the color of my scales. I remember I had a not a trident. It's like a trident, but it had two kind of spikes on it, and it wasn't triangular. It was more rounded. It was more, I think, symbolic than actual for like battle. But I was kind of an advisor to the royalty of the mermaids there. So and also I guess their spy, kind of their spy master, we'll say. So I have memories of being tortured for information before I was killed of that. And I remember underground tunnels and like people trying to flee. And a lot of us were rescued by the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds and given the option to either go to Sirius B, which is another closest water world, or to go to Earth, which happened later when Earth became a living library. So
yeah, let's talk about that. First time I heard about the living library was through Barbara Marciniak. Do you know her? She talks, well, she channels the Pleiadians, and she gets into like the wars during the early years, at least through on Earth. Well, to me at least, the living libraries like Earth in the early years with all the proto-humans, and where that's
mhm.
where the Dracos I think came in and tried to take control of the planet. So there was other species from outside that came in on
Mhm.
to Earth to battle them to try to free the planet.
Yeah,
So
you're talking
that,
about the Earth Terran Wars, yeah.
yeah,
But before, prior to that, when everyone decided that the reason why we even needed a living library was because when the Draconians invaded, they don't come from this universe, okay, and neither does their technology. Their universe was overrun by AI. Well, they tapped into an AI sentient thing. It's not exactly the AI we have now, but we are sure getting pretty close. But anyways, they almost destroyed all organic life in their universe, and they were able to traverse through this shapely attractor, which is a astrological, not astrological, astronomy body. You can search it, and it's an entryway into the omniverse, and it's basically a giant spiral at the center of this universe, and at the center is a white hole, and that white hole is pure supernova energy. So if you have the authority and the ability, you can travel into the omniverse, and that's how they got through into our universe because they fled theirs. Now they brought this technology, and they have this prime directive of just to conquer. It's just how they are. They are very much hive-minded. They just believe that they should be the number one beings in the universe and that everything is below them. And so they started just conquering worlds. And of course, we had no idea that they were this way. And they just came and started attacking beings and attacking planets. And so they would always take the resources, they would always kill for those that wouldn't submit, and then the rest would just be slaves. And so there were a couple races that were actually killed off completely. So it was decided by many high councils, including of course, the Andromedan High Council, but all the high councils, as well as the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds, that something had to be done. This was a concern because if they started eradicating races, then this DNA, this race is lost to time. So they decided to make negotiations with the reptilians that were on Earth to create Earth as a living library. And so they would then establish Earth as a living library to house all DNA from the entirety of the omniverse, not just this universe, which is why sometimes you see plants or bugs and you're like, what is that? Like, because they're not from this universe. So,
well, that makes sense. Is that one of the reasons why that Alex Coley would call us, at least the humans, we're genetic royalty because we've got the DNA of a whole bunch of other races?
Okay. I'm not familiar too much with his work. I've heard of him, but I haven't watched any of his stuff. But as far as being genetic royalty, what I think is interesting about humans, and humans specifically, is we do house a collective of genetics. I wouldn't say the entirety of the omniverse, but it is, a multitude of different species combined. But we have the ability that so many other races do not. Everybody's like, what's so special about humans in this human avatar is the fact that we can embody both our upper chakras and our lower chakras at the same time. So in that balance of light and dark, in that balance of service to self and service to others, we can find that homeostasis in between. And other races cannot. When you're a highly ascended density being, you're only in your upper chakras. You cannot deal with the lower chakras. That's too dense. So, you're one or the other. There's that duality. And so humans were this perfect symbiotic relationship of both. And that's why I guess you can say we're genetic royalty, but.
I see. Okay. You talked about fractals. Could you get into that?
Yeah, so I use fractals for my Andromedan brain. This is the easiest way to describe it because what there is you have your higher self. Everybody is familiar with the term your higher self. You've got your higher self, which is your super consciousness, and you've got your astral self, which is your subconsciousness, and you, which is your consciousness. Now, your higher self, another term for that would be your oversoul. Okay, so how it works is there's source consciousness, and source consciousness fractals off, and these fractals are your oversoul, your higher self. Then your higher self or your oversoul fractals further, and that's how you get your incarnations. That's how you get every parallel life. One that is you, one is that other variations of you in different forms. So that's a fractal is that piece. So we are fractals of the oversoul. So fractals of that oversoul.
Okay. Now, so when did the ETs come into play? At least for you.
So I'm trying to think of the earliest.
Because you talked about having
Okay, so I
NDEs.
will talk about the NDEs because I think that will count. Well, I was also thinking of like earliest ET contact in the physical, which is a little different because, having an NDE is physical, but the contact with them is not necessarily physical. So the very first time that I died and had to be resuscitated, I was 8 years old and I was swimming on the beach in Galveston, and I got pulled under by a undertow and drug a mile down the beach underwater. And then I was pulled out by somebody and they had to do CPR to bring me back. Like I didn't have pulse, nothing. I wasn't breathing. And they were able to bring me back. And that was the first fractal that I incorporated, and I started getting more memories with that. So every time I would die, I would get more memories. So that's just so you understand what the fractals part of it. So that was the first time. And while I was that time, the only memory I have or thing, it wasn't really a strong experience, because I have this memory of this void of of being in nothing and being spoken to, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I think it's because that was my first fractal. So I didn't have as much awareness as I did later times. So my astral self and my higher self wasn't that integrated at the time. So that one I don't have very strong memories of. But then the second time or second big time would be when I was 19. I took my own life, and I took a bunch of pills. And I remember the first time I died, because the first time I died, it was actually in an ambulance. So they had just taken me downstairs. I was in the ambulance and I died and I flatlined. And I remember seeing my body, and I was above in the upper part of the ambulance, and I was looking at myself going, wow, I look like crap, and then going up further. And then it was I had nothing for a minute. And then I came back because they were using the paddles, came back. And then, the last time, because this happened 4 times on the way to the hospital, the last time was the biggest time. And that one is the only way I can describe the feeling is it was like being in nothing. It was like being nothing, being in nothing, feeling nothing floating, being so discombobulated, not feeling anything, but also feeling cold. It later on I realized it was the vacuum of space. So it was like being in space, complete blackness, and I hear a voice. I didn't see, I hear. And the voice was like, "Did you think it would be that easy?" And I was like, "No, but did it have to be this hard?" like, that I automatically knew what I say he because it had a male kind of undertone, and he goes, "You can't die yet. You've got a mission. You have to go back." I'm like, "Why is this so hard? Like, I don't want to be human anymore." Like, I'm like having this conversation, and he's like, "You have to go back. You can do this a million times. You're not going to die." So it was funny because so I was like, fine, like, oh, this is like a I was 19, so I'm still technically a teenager, and I kind of had that attitude, like, fine, I'll go back, and so I wake up. And I'm like, in bed, and I'm so groggy. I've got tubes coming out of my mouth. I'm like, oh, it was awful. They pumped my stomach and stuff. And so I'm like, I remember saying with the tube in my mouth, I'm back. Like, they were just like, the doctors are looking at me. So they take me in the room, and it was funny because they have you speak to a psychologist whenever you try to commit suicide. And they're like, if we let you go, are you going to do this again? And I looked at her dead in the face. And I was like, no, what's the point? I can't die. And she's like, oh, well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're not going to do this again, but what do you mean you can't die? I'm like, they told me I can't die, so what's the point? And I was so like mad and indignant about it. And I had very, very lots of like, I should say, close calls after that weren't an NDE where I should have died. I never did. I would push the limits to that because I was like, you know what, we'll see about that. And then the next time after that, that one was a bit more intense. That one was as somebody trying to kill me and drown me. It was an ex that I had. And so I literally, that was definitely a big one. And as I was drowning, I remember being separated, like this feeling of kind of like letting go, but not completely, almost like being like I'm letting go, but I'm hanging onto a string, a cord, And I was kind of going up and seeing, it was kind of dark anyway where I was at physically, and so I didn't see much. And then as I got up again, I'm like in the higher room, and I'm sitting. I'm like, how am I sitting? What am I sitting on? And I'm like looking, and like it's almost like when the lights go up at a theater, everything starts to suddenly get brighter. So it was like that, and I'm sitting in kind of like chairs. They're not like regular chairs. They were like blocks that were carved into chairs. And I'm sitting in a semi kind of oval, and there's like lots of people, beings, and they looked humanoid-ish. I mean, I could see heads, and they're wearing uniforms, and the uniforms are blue. And we're all sitting there, and they're talking. And as it's like when the lights came up, so did the sound. It was like, like the sound suddenly got clearer and clearer. And I'm sitting there, just looking. And at the time, I got the feeling nobody really noticed I was there until like the sound and visual got full strength, I guess. And then all of a sudden, like it gets quiet, and then they all look at me, and I'm like, that awful feeling when you're on stage naked or something, and you have those dreams, you're like, and then all of a sudden they look at you and you're like, wait, what? And that feeling of like, oh, she's here. But it wasn't like she's here in the sense of like, she shouldn't be here, but like, how is she cognizant of being here? I don't know how to explain the feeling I got of that. Like I was aware that I was there. It was like another awareness inhabited my body. So maybe like my ET self was there and then suddenly had another awareness, which was me. And so they recognized that, and they all looked at me like something had changed about me. And then then I hear one being say, oh. And then they kind of look at each other, and the next thing I know, I was out. And so that was really interesting. And then I would say the next time that I had been taken, where I was actually very much aware of what was going on. Now, I've had contact with the council since that event. That was my first introduction. I later realized or was told that was the council meeting. And so what was happening is my ET self, which my Andromedan self, was there, and then all of a sudden my current self, the awareness that is human, got put into that body. And so there was like a shift. And so there was like this weird kind of, everybody realized like, oh, she's not supposed to be here. And like this version of me, or, you know. So that's kind of the understanding that I got to that. But anyways, and then there was another time I was taken, and my body, my ET, my essence, that is me, it's like my human avatar shut down in the physical, actually in the physical. And all of a sudden I was in my ship and I was with my crew. And in my head, I'm thinking, where am I? What's going on? But what came out of my mouth was different. It was, why am I here? I shouldn't be here right now. And they were like, you know, something went wrong. Like we're trying to check on something. And they're like, she forgot how to play the game. And I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, what game? But what came out of my mouth, again, was not what I was thinking. It was, get me back there. And I was like in my head, and like, I feel like I say in my head, but it wasn't my head, because I'm thinking one thing and my mouth is saying something else. But anyways, then I get back in my body, and my whole limbs, my whole body feels like it's tingling, like when your leg goes asleep, but it's all over my body. I can't move. I feel like I'm paralyzed. I can't move my face. Like it's like everything feels like it's waking up or something. And I'm like, I start to say something, but it's like, you know, everything was just discombobulated, and I was slurring my speech and everything. And I hear in my ear like an in-ear piece, except I'm not wearing an in-ear piece. And they're saying, you know, just take deep breaths, calm down, your heart rate's too high. And they're like, you know, we're just fixing some things. Everything should be fine right now. And as soon as they said now, everything was back in my body. Like I could control my body. And I was like, okay. And so I'm like a little, like I'm freaking out. My heart rate is still high. And I jump. I happened to be in the driver's seat when this happened. And I was with my mom. We were camping. And I'm sitting in the seat. And of course, I wasn't driving, thank God. But anyway, so I open the door and I fly out, and I'm like, Mom, like this is happening. I'm like freaking out, you know, and my heart rate is like literally 90 something beats per minute. And then it jumped up to like 120. Then it went up to 170. Like I was having a full blown panic attack at this point. And it happened several times throughout the course of about an hour, where my body would shut down avatar style, like. And when I did that, my Apple Watch recorded that my heart rate was like at whatever it was, 120, you know, was going crazy high, and it would drop to 84 beats per minute, and it would stay flatline at 84 beats per minute. It was like literally Avatar style. Like I got beamed up. Later on, I found out and was told that my Andromedan self is a 12D, 12 density being. So it's a light being. So it streams my entire consciousness into this human avatar. So I don't have a physical ET body. So as a light being, I can stream my entire consciousness. So my body does actually deactivate like Avatar. So that's why. And so that was really, and I actually have all this recorded, and I have videos about it where I actually take screenshots, and it's so cool because you can see my heart rate, my breathing, my oxygen level flatline at 84. And heart rate doesn't do that. Your heart rate doesn't stay for that length of time. And so it's really cool. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. So
That's quite fascinating, because you get into the filter, or which is the aspect that you are right now, and it's as if the real you took over, which I find that fascinating. And being in your shoes, that would have been really crazy.
oh, it was nuts. It was so nuts. And I had something like that happen in a different state when I was meditating, where that same thing happened. So it was repeatable, which was cool for me, because as a scientist, I always want to repeat the facts. I don't want it to be an anomaly. And so I did it in meditation, and the same thing happened, where my body, I deactivated again. My heart rate went into the flatline part, where it's staying at the same, breaths per minute, same, I went from literally awake to deep sleep immediately. And that's not how that works. You have REM sleep, you have light sleep, all of that. So there are cycles, and it just went to coma, like coma state. And so that happened for 1 hour. And when I came back to my body, again, the pins and needles, again, that feeling of awareness, like I was almost getting back into my body. And again, that was for a council meeting. And I remember everything about the meeting. So it's interesting the way that happens now.
You talked about your ship, your crew. Who are they?
So it's interesting. My crew is actually comprised of Neptune beings, and there are beings from Neptune, and they're pretty amazing. They look similar. Like I said, I have a whole video about this, but they look similar to the Greys in some aspects. They do not have the perfect skull. If anything, their head is a little bit more lumpy, but they do have kind of this like shape here. But their eyes are like ours in a sense. They're bigger, but they're like ours. They are colored. They have blue eyes. But their skin is like a grayish kind of hue to it, and they do not speak verbally. They speak telepathically. So when I say they were telling me, oh, she forgot how to play the game, they're not saying it with their mouth. They're saying it telepathically and projecting it. Like I said, it felt like I had an in-earpiece, but I didn't because they were speaking telepathically, and it's so clear. And they were wearing all the same uniforms, again, with the blue uniforms. It's like standard uniform for my crew. And the ship was I've been to it many times. It's very, very large. And most Andromedan ships are very, very large. And something really cool about my species is because we're light body, we don't have our own necessarily physical shape, but we do have the ability to shapeshift our energy into physicality. And that obviously, because that's what I'm doing now, but we can also take on the shape of other beings to help facilitate communication, diplomacy. It's basically what the Andromedans do, which is why I can speak 9 human languages. We're really good master communicators. And so we essentially, there's a form of myself. I have long blonde hair, and I take on the shape, and I'm wearing a uniform, and I'm like, so I can have physicality in this ET form if I shapeshift into that. So pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. So, and the fact that we have Neptune crew, I always thought that was interesting. But there's a major start gate off of Neptune. First of all, Neptune has giant communication towers that basically are the communication for most of the bases in the Milky Way, and they are huge. They're massive. I've actually done missions with other people in the physical where we worked on those communication towers. And there is a major stargate that goes from there all the way to the Andromeda Galaxy in the Messier 31 sector. So pretty cool.
Wow. Now, growing up, you were talking about like archangels. Did you grow up in an environment where your parents would talk about that?
I was raised Catholic. I did go all the way through Catholic, to the schools, and I even got confirmation. So that's the last, thing we get slapped by the priest. And I always thought I always had this like love-hate relationship with religion, because of course Catholics were inundated with so much programming and stuff, but I never agree. I would always be the child in class who would ask the question of why this doesn't make sense. Like, here's the question. Okay, now tell me, explain this, and I would give them facts, and then they'd be like, shut up, like, go sit down, go do that, because they would shut me down because I always have a question they couldn't answer. Yeah. And so, but they also were really fascinated by all the knowledge that I had being so young, being that it's not like I went out and read books. I don't read spiritual books. I didn't even know they existed for a long time, that there were books that talked about what I talked about. And so I think it's really interesting when other people talk about the same stuff when I don't even know them, so.
Well, let's get back to the Andromedan Council. Now, did you have like these long conversations with them, or were you like doing like in and outs?
So usually I would go to make decisions. So for example, we made decisions about the Procyon beings. I have a whole video history about them if you want to know about them, but essentially they're still really struggling with ascension. And so we had to make decision with other councils as to whether or not they're ready to be accepted into mainstream galactic society, if they've done enough work to ascend from all the trauma that they went through because of the Draconians. So we made decisions about that. We also made decisions about what to do about the directed energy weapons that we had been trying to shut down, that the government has been using on their people. Those are just some of the ones I can say now. But yeah, I absolutely remember. Now, there are some things I told my higher self, because some of it gets really heavy, like emotionally, and it's very intense. And so if I'm constantly doing work in the astral, and I'm constantly doing work in the waking, like, when do I get a break? So I told my higher self, I said, look, if this doesn't pertain to my current human avatar, I don't really need to know. I don't want to remember. So I started putting stipulations because it got to be really heavy on me. It was emotionally draining, exhausting to have to constantly, like, I have people that come up to me all the time. They're like, I dreamed of you. You were helping me and guiding me do this. I'm like, yeah, I know. I do that a lot. And it's why when I wake up, I feel like I haven't slept because I'm constantly working. So I do remember a lot of the stuff, but some stuff that if it's classified or if there is a bias, like, for example, I can't make a decision on something if it pertains to something to me or my immediate environment. And if it has something that pertains to humans as a whole, there are only certain aspects I am allowed to remember in this iteration. And that's just to protect me. So,
Now, regarding, I've had like experiences with shadow beings. Like we brought up into that earlier on. Have you had anything like
interdimensionals.
similar?
Hmm. Yeah. As an archangel, I can see entities. I can see interdimensional beings. I can see ghosts. I can see, not just sense, but see. So as part of the work that I do is I remove entities from people, implants. I'm a psychic surgeon. So the shadow beings are a type of interdimensional. When you lower or raise your frequency in a certain way that you can access and you can see them. Usually it has to, I'm going to be honest, it usually has to do with people who have done meth. Methamphetamines is where they see the shadow people because it lowers their frequency to a state. And I say lower because it's not higher that you see is a lower frequency being. And they kind of dwell in this in between. So you can think of like frequencies, just like your radio where you have FM and AM. What happens is you're on a certain FM and you're tuning in sometimes to AM, and sometimes those frequencies will align, and then you can hear both simultaneously. Right, and that's where you get this kind of weird static. So that's basically what the shadow people are, but they really, much like certain beings that feed off of loosh, if you're familiar with loosh, that energy, that lower energy is what they feed off of, what's what they're drawn to. So that's why you get a sense of like, these are not good beings because they want your fear. They want, whatever that lower frequency emotion is that they can pull from you, because emotion is just energy plus motion. When you direct that energy in a certain motion higher, then you get high frequency emotions. When you direct it lower, you get lower frequency.
Have you ever had contact with the mantids or insectoids at least?
Yeah, the mantid beings are the Antarians. I actually have channeled them most recently, actually, which was a really interesting light language that came out of me. Lots of clicking and really interesting stuff. That was the first time I channeled them, but they're amazing beings. They really are. There's two different groupings of them. There is the gold mantids that wear white robes, and then there's the green mantid that wear gray robes. It's kind of like the difference of like Gandalf the white versus Gandalf the gray, a sense of density, like higher density. But they are the creators and architects of the matrices, the simulations, and the energetic spaces. What I mean by that is there are energetic spaces that we have, for example, bridges of consciousness. When you first transition, you cross over, when you die, you cross through the veil of remembrance. And that's where you get all of your memories from all your past incarnations in your higher self form. So you can then remember, they're in charge of this. They create these, okay? Then when you go to incarnate or reincarnate, you pass through the veil of forgetting, and you wipe the slate clean so you can learn and grow and do all the things you need to do. Now, the room of review, there's waypoint stations is what I call them, but some people call it the hall of a mentee, all of these words. What they are is energetic spaces and simulations that are created by the Antarians. And there are kind of like a place in between two altered states of consciousness where you can reside to accomplish certain goals. So they also create energetic spaces for meetings, because when you have different density beings, how do they all get together? Some are non-corporeal, some are corporeal. So they create these energetic spaces where they can all house a physical shape, not physicality, but a physical shape, so they can all communicate. And these are created by the Antarians. So they are the architects of the different matrices and simulations. They're very powerful beings. They also relocate planets. It's pretty amazing.
Relocate, how so? They move it physically?
So what they create, they open up these energetic spaces or energetic stargates, wormholes, if you will, that relocate the planet, suck it in, and put it into another sector. So it's pretty amazing.
Okay. Well, fascinating. Now, remote viewing, let's get into that. Now, did you like do a course to do that, or did you have like these abilities
Yeah,
for their
I
own.
teach people how to do it, but I've never been taught how to do it. I have my whole family, we have a lot of psychic gifts.
Wow.
Um, we've always done, telepathy. We've always been psychic. We've always had prophetic dreams. I mess with time a lot, which is I like to do frequently because it's most handy. But essentially, I call it time slipping. I guess another word for it would be chronokinesis. So all of the psychokinesis gifts I have access to, all the psychic abilities. Remote viewing. I mean, really, all of that is remote viewing is just a part of the clairs, essentially. So
Yeah.
it's just a sect of that of the
Yeah.
clairs.
I did the Monroe Institute Gateway course.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. I heard about that place.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we did it
interesting.
up north, but we had this sort of hotel rented, and we had this. It was really cool, and there was a buffet. But during the entire day, we do these courses with the music, try to get this hypnosis thing going on, and we like try to leave our bodies and somewhat.
Oh, wow.
One time I was meditating and I went to bed, and that's when I started. I think I remote viewed, but because I was seeing the side view of a man. It looked a bit like the sort of ET, like that watched over like one of the presidents. You see him on the net. He's bald, and you only see the side view of the
Mm-hmm.
face.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I saw. And when I was realizing that I was looking at a face, and I concentrated on the face turns towards me,
Yes, they will.
back at me.
If you can look, they will look back. You have to be careful with remote viewing.
I had
This
no
is
idea.
why this. So the CIA has declassified their protocol for remote viewing, and you got to be really careful when you look. Somebody's always looking back. So, when I teach my students, I'm like, we always start with. We actually had an incident during class. I'll tell you it. But we were doing an exercise, and they give you a mark, a target, right? And you try and visualize the target. And all of a sudden, I said the target number wrong in my head, and so I saw the wrong target. And then because I saw the wrong target, my students all saw the number I saw, and they saw the wrong target. And it was a fighter jet, and it was some military stuff. And I was like, so I pull back, and I'm like, oh, okay, we need to stop. This is not right. And I started seeing like details about this, and it just kept getting worse. And I was like, okay, we got to pull back, pull back. So I shut down the exercise because they all saw that, and we talked about it afterwards. And they were like, yeah, I started getting like military stuff, and then missile. I was like, just nix that, nix ixnay on the upid stay. We don't want to talk about that. So yeah, it was. You have to be really careful about the remote viewing aspect of that, but it is fun.
Now let's get into the services you offer on your website. So what type of
Okay.
service do you offer?
So right now I have a couple things that are coming and in the works, but right now of course, I offer the Galactic History Report. It's 2 hours long of your entire incarnations, as well as 2 hours of galactic history. I mean, I've said a little bit here, but I have eons of information because again, I don't forget, and I have all my memories. So I talk about your personal galactic history, every incarnation you've had, the jobs you've had, the beings you've worked with, and then we talk about your gifts, we talk about your blockages, your karmic analysis as it relates from those lives to this life. And then we talk about anything that may be holding your back and the blockages. And that takes 2 hours, every bit of 2 hours. And it's recorded, it's on Zoom. Then I also offer light language healings. I also activate your gifts depending on, where you're at. I always say start with the Galactic History Report because then you know where you're going from there. Then I offer a master class where I have students. I teach them how to do telekinesis, telepathy, and we all do it on camera. Like everybody does it. All of my students, there's not one person who has failed. So these are gifts. We're trying to teach people how to live in the new earth. And then also I do musical light language as well, and I will be offering some more. I do a sacred pain release ceremony. And I will be doing like a kind of an a la carte gift. So if you don't want to take the whole course or you can't afford it, then we break it off, and let's say you can just focus on the psychokinesises or you can focus on the psychic abilities. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I have right
fascinating.
now. And then I've got some fun stuff coming up. I'm working on starting an actual country for starseeds. It's here in Europe. I'm actually not in Texas. I'm in Europe. I'm in Bulgaria right now, and I'm moving to Czech Republic. But the country will be located in between Serbia and Croatia, and it's an actual country. We have passports already. We have permanent residence cards. It is a free republic that is decentralized government with blockchain technology as the currency. It is on merit system. We have a government already established as far as, on paper, so to speak. But you can go there, and we actually are building from the ground up. We are settling it. It's a real place. So that's also in the works, and I'm going to be on the ground sending more videos. I'm going to become a representative for the country, so that'll be pretty awesome. It's coming up.
I had Dr. Louis Thury on. He's from France, and he's an astrologist, I believe. And he did, prior to the show, he did a reading for me. And what came out of it was fascinating. And the guy was dead on. He got into my past lives and stuff like that. And
interesting.
he got into like health issues that I had, and without even knowing me, and dead on. So when it comes to reading and stuff like that, I'm really into it now.
Yeah, I would love to see how a reading that you do with me correlates to what, because I don't know whatever he did for you, and because the one I do is based on your time of birth, your date of birth and location. So it'd be interesting to see how this correlates.
Fascinating. Getting back to your story, now regarding the work that you've been doing, have you ever had like dark entities showing up, try to shut you down?
Yes and no. I say yes and no because as an archangel, when somebody has an entity attached to them, it will control them in the sense that it will make them feel very fearful of me, even if I've said or done nothing. They don't want to be in my presence because the archangel very much threatens them, and we have the ability to literally command them away. So literally, it's, I don't want to say like the power of Christ compels you, not like that, but essentially we can command. They don't like to be in our light, so to speak. So in some ways, they cannot psychically attack me, but they can control people to physically attack me. And so my ex that tried to drown me had an entity attached to him, and that's why he tried to kill me. And literally my entire life I've had people try to kill me. So it's very much, yeah. So it cannot affect me psychically, but it can affect me physically. So I definitely have seen entities, and especially being a child, where you're just a big ball of light, you can attract a lot of dark energy because they want to consume that light. Okay. So
did you ever get like electronic harassment from the government, spying?
Oh yeah, my wires, my phone had been tapped back when we had landlines. my phone or whatever house I was living in had always been tapped, and it was funny because you could hear them talking sometimes. And me and my best friend always joked because her dad was in the CIA, and I had a cousin in the CIA, and so we'd be like, "Bob, get off the phone, like get off the line," or we'd start talking about female problems just to screw with them. And things like that, and like talk about her periods or whatever, just to mess with them. So yes. And when I lived in China, fun fact, and I did get videos of this, but my hotel that I was staying at, we had spy stuff inside the light bulbs, underneath the tables. Like it was that we'd like break the light bulbs and flush it down the toilet. So yeah. Definitely been harassed that way. And then, like I said, the MIB thing that happened to me, and them like telling me to leave the city and stuff, was kind of definitely a trip. But yeah, as soon as they thought I was going to join the government, they stopped harassing me as much. And then I went away from that, and they were like, "Uh-oh, she's gone over to the other side."
You talked about the new Earth earlier on. I've had quite a few that actually saw it physically when they were being taken. So what's your take on it? Are there like multiple new Earths? Is it a plan B? What is it?
Yeah, so, well, I wouldn't say plan B, but I would say there are multiple or infinite number of timelines. And if you understand quantum physics and you understand that, we have one reality in which, let's say, there is a white ball, and then we have one reality where there's a black ball, and then we have a reality where both exist simultaneously. But there are infinite number of that, so multiply that. And then, so when you quantum jump timelines, this is why we get Mandela effects. You're essentially, when you're manifesting, because we are master manifestors, we are co-creators of this universe. To manifest, you have to align your thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, right? So let's say you're manifesting a timeline in which you're changing one detail because you have to do it in increments. Then you create that timeline, but the timeline still exists in which that isn't the case. And then you've got another timeline that's a variation. So you're just shifting timelines. So we're trying to shift timelines to the timeline in which the new Earth, which already exists. It already has been that way. Terra Earth, which was a 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th density version of Earth, we're on Gaia. Well, some of us are on Gaia, some of us are already on Terra Earth, which Gaia Earth would be 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D. Okay. So what happened is a cataclysm set Earth back and kind of regressed Earth and created a lower timeline. And that's where most of humanity is on. So there was a bifurcation of the timelines, and the higher timelines would go on one trajectory, and then the lower timelines will be on the lower trajectory, which would be more what people say, like the apocalyptic stuff. And then the higher timelines will be where that doesn't exist. And so it's already happened. Like I already shifted timelines, and it's so cool because when I take pictures of my son and everything, it's totally different than what a lot of people see. And I post them all the time, and people are like, the sun doesn't look like that. I'm like, it does for me, and you'll know that because the world around you changes. So for example, I'll give you the easiest example. When I lived in Texas, Texas has a lot of tornadoes. They have a lot of really inclement weather. There's a lot of crazy things that go on tornado wise. So we get alerts all the time on our phone and things like that. So I lived with my mom. We lived together, and we would get this alert, the siren going off, like tornado touchdown, seek immediate cover. Like it's located in your area, like within 5 miles. That's like 3 kilometers. So like located in a very short area. So seek shelter, immediate shelter. And we go outside and we're looking around, and it's sunny and it's bright and there's like not a cloud in the sky. And we're like, what is going on? So then I was like, well, whatever. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to go run my errands. So I leave, get in my car, and I go run my errands. And as I'm driving, like I'm still getting the alerts. It's still going off on my phone. I go to Walmart because I had to go inside Walmart because there was a shop inside that I needed to go to. And as I get into Walmart, people are running around like crazy, and the sirens are going off in the parking lot. And I was like, this is bizarre because it's a sunny day. What's going on? And, it's getting about to be around 5:30. It's starting to get a little bit towards dusk. But again, no clouds. And so I go in, and the security guard is like, ma'am, you cannot go in. There's a tornado. We have closed down the registers. And I'm like, well, I don't need to buy anything. I need to go to a store inside, and they're expecting me. I have an appointment, and they're still open. And so he let me in, and I go to the store in the inside, and she's like, what's going on? And why are people running around? And I'm like, I don't know. They say there's a tornado, but it's like super sunny outside. And she's like, okay, whatever. So we just like do our stuff. And then we keep hearing this door slam in the back of her shop. And so the back of her shop would be the front of Walmart. So you understand like where it's at, okay? So then we hear a door slamming, and she's like, hold on one second. I'm gonna go see what that is. She goes back to the door that goes to the outside, and it's closed. And then she comes back, and then we hear it slamming, opening, slamming. She goes back, and she goes, it's closed. And so we were just like, okay, this is weird. So I finish checking out with her, and I go to leave, and the security guard is blocking it. And he's like, ma'am, you can't leave. There's a tornado outside. And I was like, and I'm seeing these homeless guys come up, and they're at on the other side of the glass doors, and they're like crying and banging to come inside. And I'm like, do you see these people? Let them inside. They're terrified. And so I said, I have to go. And he's like, you can't go out, man. There's a tornado. I said, look, I'm divinely protected, okay? And I'm like, let me out. So they let me out, and the homeless guys come in, and they're bawling. And I'm just like, I go out, and I'm looking outside, and I see a shopping cart shoot across the front, and like it's flying with the wind, but I don't feel any wind. I go outside, I get in my car, and there's like nothing. And you would think like the way everybody's acting, and they're barring the doors, like there's something crazy going on. I get in my car, I start to drive, then it starts to rain, just lightly rain, okay? And so I'm driving, and I see down power lines. I see like there's still traffic. The what do you call it? The traffic lights are out. They're blinking, flashing. There's no power. But again, it's just sprinkling. So I get on the major freeway because I live in Dallas. It's a big city. Get on the major freeway and I go to exit on my exit, and it's like an exit that gets off and then it goes under an overpass. And as I turn under the overpass, there's like 7 cars parked underneath the overpass. And they're all pulled over and they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm looking at them like they're crazy because I'm stopping at the stop sign there and we're looking at each other and they're like huddled underneath this overpass like they can't drive. And so I just keep going. I get all the way to my block. My block has power. I get in, I go inside, open my garage, get inside and go talk to my mom. And I'm like, Mom, did we lose power? She's like, no. And it's just a little sprinkle. And again, we hear the sirens and I'm like, what is going on? So I realized that we can still exist, because if you understand how dimensions work, that you can exist in the same space and be of a different dimension. So the lower timelines, that was the beginning of the bifurcation of the timelines. And I could interact with them, but they weren't experiencing what I was experiencing and I wasn't experiencing what they were experiencing. So that's the earliest examples, but I'll give you some even more examples. You know how people are posting pictures of the 2 suns, 4 suns. You know, again, these are multiple timelines, and as we quantum leap, there are new Mandela effects that pop up. The biggest one that got me, and this was the biggest timeline jump that we had recently, which was back in October. There was beautiful crystalline DNA codes, and I got video of it. It looked like crystalline codes raining down on us, and I got video. It was beautiful, and so then there was a new Mandela effect, and the newest one was there's a song by Bing Crosby called "I'll Be Home for Christmas." You probably heard of it. It's a Christmas Carol. Okay, so in the song, he says, "I'll be home for Christmas. You can count on me." But the lyrics have changed now, and now it's "you can plan on me." I'm sorry, but that's not even proper English. Okay, and that happened right in that big timeline jump. So that was the newest. So there's new Mandela effects happening all the time. That's a good sign. That means you're shifting, and you want to constantly be shifting, always aligning with your highest timeline. So the new Earth is the highest timeline. So we want to continue to shift humanity and shift ourselves and our environment till we get to the timeline that is in our highest timeline, which is the new Earth. So the new Earth isn't so much an exact planet that exists. It is a timeline that we're getting where an Earth exists that doesn't have all the crappy stuff that we're trying to get away from. So that's quantum physics in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah, I do want a piece of that. Now, let's finish off the interview. Like, do you have perhaps another story you might want to share, or perhaps a closing statement to get out?
Yeah. I guess what I will say is, I will say something about the solar events. I'm very sensitive to every solar flare that goes off, and literally to the second I know when my heart tells me, because I start getting short of breath, and I will look, and then all of a sudden we got a X-class flare or whatever. If you're feeling any kind of discomfort, if you're feeling like nothing's happening, if you're feeling any kind of sense of hopelessness or anything, just know that things are changing. They really are. And we're seeing the culmination of all of our hard work and effort. And so don't give up. Don't feel like, what you're doing isn't enough, or don't feel like you have to do something for it to happen. Just you being on the path and doing the inner work and doing what you're supposed to be doing as, this starseed here, you're already shifting and changing things around you. And so I just want you to know, and want your viewers to know, that you are making a difference, and to don't give up.
That's beautiful. Well, thanks for coming on, Mina. It's been fun. And I'm a bit sad that you had to go through these events as a kid with the government. Like, no kid should have to go through that. But it's I guess it's one hell of a growth thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about rough experiences, I will just say one more thing about that. Just understand that trauma, how do we ground ourselves as human? How do we know we're alive? It's pain. It's pain, it's suffering, it's trauma. And nothing grounds us more to this experience than going through these things. And they do shape us, but they also make us stronger. And they prepare us for all the things we have to go through later on, because this is a battle. It is a battle. It may be spiritual. Some may see it as a physical battle. Some may see it as a mental battle. Whatever the case may be, you need it to go through things to make you stronger, to make you who you are, so that you could come out on top, you know? So...
Well, there's one thing I love about Chinese dramas, which I love, or they talk
Oh,
about.
so I wanted to say Jayo, and I wanted to know if you would get that expression. Oh my God.
Really? Yeah.
Jayo.
Well, trials, and for me, and well, they get into cultivation, stuff like that. So it's one hell of a, well, for me at least, with my life, it's been one hell of a trial so far. So, well, thanks for coming on, Mina. It's been fun.
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me.
to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I sure did. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So, take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.